This is AM 650's The Law Show with Sterling Fox. Now back to the show.
Nice to have you with us this first Sunday of 2014. It's family law on this episode of The Law Show with our guests from Lindsay Kenney LLP, lawyers Angela Thiel and Christine Eilers. The firm is online, by the way, at lklaw.ca, offices in downtown Vancouver, at least, at 401 West Georgia, and there are offices in Langley as well, and that's Walnut Grove area, I think, isn't it? 200th Street out there in Langley? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about gifts. It's that here we are just after the holiday. You want to talk about gifts? I am so shopped out. I don't even want to listen to this part. I'm not talking about presents. I'm talking about the kind of gifts that parents or grandparents or great aunts and uncles give to their descendants. They give them, in some cases, shocking amounts of cash to go buy houses or cars or whatever, pay off your student loan, whatever. When a couple, when a person receives a gift of significant proportions from one of their relatives, and they're in a relationship or contemplating going into a relationship, where does that gift play in the relationship in terms of family law? Is it mine? Is it therefore separate and apart from any agreement I may enter into? Or because it's for a house and there's a lot of dough, is it for both of us? Angela, how do you start on something like that? Well, you start by having a young person receive a shocking, huge amount of money.
Maybe under the Christmas tree, but probably
not.
not.
And you know what? It's only a couple of weeks since Christmas. It may very well have happened to someone listening to us right now, or you may be listening to us having had the satisfaction of passing along a nice, tidy sum of money to some young person in your life. Okay, how's that going to play out?
Okay, well, let's start with one thing. Don't spend it on a depreciating asset, because once it's depreciated, you don't get anything out of it.
So keep the cars out of the equation.
You got it. So basically the Family Law Act says that you can exclude a gift from a parent or a relative from consideration when you divide your assets. But it's only going to be easily done if you document it, put it in an agreement, or you spend it on something where you can actually say, okay, this amount of money can be traceable into this particular property, either real property, money I've put in an RSP, money I've put in a brokerage account. If you use it, for example, to renovate the kitchen, don't expect to get it back. And we just had a recent case about that.
Oh, really?
So the problem is that the statute says it's got to be traceable into a property, and in essence, traceable means you got to see the value is still there. And if your real estate or your realtor or appraiser comes in and says, well, yeah, sure, you did a kitchen renovation 5 years ago, but it hasn't really added to the value of this house, then that's...
And that goes for all excluded property, not just gifts, but also inheritances and pre-relationship properties.
Exactly.
Oh, I see. So it somehow or another has to stand alone on its own financial merit to be exclusive to a person. Is that right?
That's right. You know, if you use it as a down payment, or you pay off the mortgage with it, it's usually pretty easy to see, well, that's where that money went, and that's the, we can trace that into the property.
Okay.
But if you buy a car with it, well, of course, that's going to depreciate, and the car might be yours, but it's not going to be the same as if you'd put it towards a house. A house.
Sure.
And then the other problem with terms of saying, well, this is mine. So what happens quite often is we'll write it into the agreement that the first $100,000 is mine. That's a very simple way to do it because it came from mom and dad. But here's the first problem. When you buy a house, you don't get that $100,000 and go right into the equity. You got PPT and lawyers' fees and all of those things. Secondly, a lot of people put that $100,000 into the house, and 5 years later they got $30,000 in credit card debt, and they refinance. So now do we
take out a second mortgage on the house?
Yes, exactly. So does that $100,000 get reduced by the amount of that debt, which would seem fair? But you have to sort of talk to your clients about, do we write a clause for this, or do you guys just understand that that's probably what's likely to happen?
And you can amend the agreement down the road, too, before you do something like that. You can change the agreement.
Flip the coin for us, Christine. What are the pitfalls, if any, for the giver, the well-intentioned senior relative with all the money who wants to spread it around? I've got nieces and nephews and so on. And what what should those people, the gifting types, what should they be aware of?
Well, normally I think when they're doing that, they're intending to benefit their child.
Yes.
And they're not intending to benefit really their child's spouse once they separate. And so to ensure that that gift is well documented and is to their child and not just to their child and his or her spouse is essential. And also normally requiring that child to have an agreement. Again, it's similar to what we were talking about earlier, is that if there's no agreement in place, it's fuzzy. It's what happened here. Was this a gift to me or was this a gift to both of us?
Right,
was this
right.
a loan? There's a lot of disputes that come up, and they were under the old law and they're still going to come up under the new law probably. So again, documenting things and having an agreement.
Okay, now, Angela, let's use an example that's entirely plausible. 2 weeks ago was Christmas morning, we're all gathered around, and there's an envelope on the tree for, Sally and Johnny, and they're married, and by gosh, it's a check for $100,000, and, their names are on the envelope, and so eventually the relationship doesn't last the holidays successfully, and all of a sudden there's $100,000 that was given to them, they think, on Christmas Day. Who gets the $100,000, or are they just wise to split it and go their separate ways?
Sadly enough, I had that file under the Family Relations Act, exactly that circumstance. And at that time, the law was that a gift to a married couple was presumed to be a gift to both of them.
Okay.
So then you get down to, well, their both names are on the envelope. What did the check say?
Mm-hmm.
And the parents who might be saying, well, I would have thought it seemed just a little rude to
give money to our son and not his wife.
Yeah, exactly.
She's in the room.
Yeah, she's in the room. But we made sure the check was to him. So that was under the Family Relations Act. We settled it. I think that probably we gave him a little bit more of it, but it wasn't it wasn't quite a 50-50.
But that wouldn't have been an entirely excluded thing under the old law anyway.
Right.
So then under the new act, we have the same situation. So we have prima facie under the new act, the gift to him from his family is his. And then you have to look at how the gift is used.
Oh, so there has been a real change in law in that
absolutely.
regard. So the new Family Law Act, which is the subject of this show on our first Sunday of the new year, this is less than a year old, and really some things have changed rather profoundly here.
Yeah.
Well, remember I said to you that one of the things they were trying to change were the things that made people litigate.
Yeah.
And family gifts, inheritance, family loans,
Pre-relationship property, the biggest one probably.
Those all were, if you had to count all the cases that were in the courts and say, well, what do they relate to? If they weren't about kids, they were about those categories of different things in family law. I mean, people don't go to court if they, got together at 22 and they had a job and they got a mortgage and they got a house and,
built it all together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But they do litigate when mom and dad gave one person a good chunk of money,
Right.
and they did tend to litigate when and it was up to the court, a judge, to say, well, I think I'll maybe make this decision in this case because I don't really have any authority or statute I can rely on. What do I think I'm going to do here?
Well, I wanted to ask you both about this because there's a lot of profile. I mean, it's always been done. I mean, this is as old as families. People, older relatives have always tried to endow their descendants with some kind of goodies. It's what we do. But there's a lot of pressure on boomers these days, and there's advertising campaigns, radio, television, print. There's a lot going on. So it's difficult for boomers not to notice this dimension in advertising and in some way to try to respond to it. Not all of us can, but some do. And I just thought we should raise it on the Law Show to look at both sides, those who will receive your well-intended gifts and the pitfalls, if any, of being the person with all the dough who's handing it out. Because there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I've seen inheritances, so a family preparing to have 3 kids inherit, and 3 kids doing different marriage agreements as to how they want to deal with those monies.
And it's all perfectly legal.
It's all perfectly legal, but, one kid saying, I'll share it this way, another
Right.
kid saying, I won't share it, and the kid in the middle having a different way of doing it.
Right.
And it's, it's not up to mom and dad what agreement they make.
Well, it could be.
Well, it could be, but
Might be wise.
Yeah, but all they want is to make sure that the kids do have an agreement and take it into account. 3 different couples 3 different, I think, husband and a wife, 2 boys and a girl, having different ideas as to what they wanted to do vis-a-vis their own spouse.
Interesting stuff. We're talking family law on this episode of The Law Show, especially the new Family Law Act, which in our province is still really new. It's not even a year old yet, and, well, the judges are still working on it, and needless to say, so are the lawyers. People like Angela Thiel and Christine Eilers from Lindsay Kenney LLP. With more still ahead, stay with us here on The Law Show.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.